Okay, you're live now.
Good morning.
But not yet.
You're being seen.
Okay, now you can say something.
Good morning. Looking forward to getting started in a few moments.
You can't see who's on. Check Jackie's phone number. Open it. It doesn't work. Okay, I need your phone.
This is a new computer, so I wanted to go on early to make sure that everything was in order. Good morning, Debbie. Good morning, Sherry. Good morning, Jim. Nice to have you all on. Beautiful day. Could have done it outside. A little bit chilly, but I think the conversation would warm us up in any case. I hope.
Can you see people getting on?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think he sees people. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, and
So you'll all have to be very patient with me this morning. I haven't gone on Facebook Live for a while, and perhaps only once before that, but we decided to shift this forum from the previous mode of Zoom to Facebook Live. Hopefully you'll be able to engage by asking questions, and we'll keep the conversation going. Last night our congregation was featured, and I was interviewed by Fox 59 for a program on how congregations and clergy are handling the current crisis, and whether they would be opening in keeping with Holcomb's recommendations or exercising most caution. More caution. I was pleased to see that all of the clergy interviewed from different denominations and different traditions agreed that it is hasty to go on at this time, and we're all going to be waiting for the protection of our congregants and of our staff, and for the welfare of all. I think it's on the website of Fox 59 and of CBS as well. Give it 1 minute so that we can start at 10:30 as announced. Well, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is part 3 of a series on Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is a rabbinic treatise. It is part of the Mishnah, which is a collection of rabbinic teaching that takes us from the 2nd century before the Common Era to the 2nd century of the Common Era, span of about 400 years. And the Mishnah becomes the foundation upon which the Talmud is built with an additional commentary on top of the Mishnah known as the Gemara. So the Mishnah plus the Gemara constitute the Talmud. The Gemara is an ongoing dialogue, commentary, conversation on the teachings of the Mishnah that spans an additional 3 to 4 centuries. And we have 2 Talmuds, in fact, a Babylonian Talmud and a Jerusalem or Palestinian Talmud, and they both constitute the foundation of what will become traditional Judaism for the centuries to come. Today, we are going to be talking about Pirkei Avot, or simply Avot, is one of the tractates of the Mishnah. It does not have a Gemara. It does not have a super commentary. So it is not part of the broadening Talmud. It is just part of the Mishnah. And part of the reason for that is that much of the Talmud is about halachic or Jewish legal, prescriptive nature, whereas the teachings of Pirkei Avot are non-legal. They belong to the realm of Agadah, narrative, as opposed to halacha, which means legal, prescriptive material. Pirkei Avot, usually translated as the chapters of the fathers, I like to translate it as foundational teachings or foundational chapters, gives us insight into character, into the psychology, into the values of our ancestors, and it particularly reflects the Jewish experience during the period of Roman domination over the land of Israel. We'll encounter some very interesting protagonists in our Pirkei Avot conversation today. I'd like to begin by noting that this past week was Teachers Appreciation Week. And in a few days, next Tuesday, we observe Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the period that we count from Pesach to Shavuot. And Lag BaOmer is known in the tradition as a scholars or teachers' day. And it particularly centers on the experience of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a Jewish mystic teacher who lived in Israel and is in fact visited in Merom in Israel. It's a place of pilgrimage, especially by people who are interested in Kabbalah. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived during the 2nd century, and he is supposed to have lived during a period of a plague that overcame the land, and he and his disciples hid in caves, and they continued to keep the tradition alive in the midst of Roman suppression and in the midst of a plague. We don't know specifically what the plague might have been, but in those circumstances, Judaism was kept alive and prepared for transmission to a next generation. I'd like to mention, in fact, that this coming Friday evening, we hope you will join us for Shabbat services, we will be honoring teachers in our religious school, in our synagogue, in keeping with this past week's observance of Teachers Appreciation Week and the upcoming observance of Lag BaOmer, the Jewish teachers or scholars holiday. Today we will learn about teachers and disciples during the early stages of Judaism, and we will encounter one of the most important teachers in the Jewish tradition during the Mishnaic period, or the early stages of Rabbinic Judaism. His name is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived during the last decade of the Second Temple. He was a disciple of Hillel and considered the most important teacher of his generation. The teachers of this period are known as Tanas, T-A-N-N-A. The word Tana means a transmitter of the oral tradition. And he anticipated the destruction of the temple by the Romans. And the legend is that he had himself hidden and carried out of the city by his disciples, Eliezer and Joshua, whom we will encounter today, to see Vespasian, who was outside as the city was being surrounded. And he appealed to Vespasian to allow him to establish a school, a teaching academy outside of the city of Jerusalem in the town known as Yavne. You'll find the name in Greek as Jamnia. And it is appropriate to say that in Yavne and in Jamnia, Yochanan ben Zakkai established the foundations of the Judaism that would follow the destruction of the temple. It became a center of spirituality and learning following the destruction of the temple, where Yochanan ben Zakkai gathered disciples and prepared Judaism for a new stage in its history, moving from a temple-based Judaism into a synagogue and home-based Judaism. Rabbi Yochanan is so appreciated in the tradition that he is called the Light of Israel, the right-hand pillar. These are names that are associated with him. He's also famous for another saying. He said that in this period of turmoil, of Roman oppression, as the people yearned for redemption, messianic redemption, that somebody would come and redeem the people of Israel from oppression and usher in a time of peace. And there was a lot of speculation, and there was a lot of anticipation, and people were becoming very excited about this possibility. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a little bit more cautious, and this bears lessons for us today. And he offered the following teaching to curb messianic excitement. He said, if you are holding a sapling in your hand and you are about to plant it, and somebody comes to you and says, come, come, the Messiah has arrived, you should first finish planting your sapling, and then you can go check if in fact the Messiah has come. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai believed in a evolutionary, progressive understanding of Torah and of mitzvot, not in utopian messianism, not in revolutionary experiences, not in the excitement and fervor of a faith based not on reason, but simply on speculative excitement. He was a gradualist, and with his foundations, Judaism begins to evolve. It is under Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's tutelage that the collection of books we called the Tanakh, or the Bible, is finally organized and produced as a canon of 24 books. And this is the essence of what Jews will carry with them into exile, whether in Babylonia or in other lands, and of course also the Jews in the land of Israel. So the determination of the books in the Bible was made by a rabbinic conclave in the year 90 in the city of Yavne. I'd like us to turn, if you have your Lev Shalem prayer book, either in the website or at hand, or to any other collection of Mishnaic teachings of Pirkei Avot that you can find in Google. I'd like us to turn to chapter 2, entry 10. So in tradition, we would call that Perek 2, chapter 2, Mishnah 10. And as you turn to that, we will encounter Rabbi Yochanan and his disciples. So let me give you a minute to get there. And Mishnah 10 says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 disciples. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, Rabbi Joshua ben Hananiah, Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, Rabbi Shimeon ben Netanel, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. And then he begins to describe his disciples. This is how he characterized them. Rabbi Eliezer is a plastered well that never loses a drop. Rabbi Joshua, happy the one who gave birth to him. Rabbi Yossi, a saintly person. Rabbi Shimeon, a pious person. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, an ever-flowing fountain. Think about those descriptions of scholarship and of discipleship. What do each of these stand for? Let me tell you a little bit more about each of them. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is mentioned 400 times elsewhere in the Mishnah. Prolific teacher. He left his family business and began studying in advanced age. He was a teacher of the famous Rabbi Akiba in the 2nd century. Rabbi Akiba was behind the second revolt against the Romans in the year 135-38. Unsuccessful revolt with unfortunate consequences for the Jewish people. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, for all his learning, was eventually separated from his colleagues because he failed to observe the decisions of the majority. And we are told that he died in solitude and in poverty. We are told here that he was a plastered well that never loses a drop. That's a rabbinic description that indicates the tremendous memory skills that he had. He was able to retain information and was able to keep it and transmit it. And that was very important at a time when books were not abundant. Teachers, or tanas as they were called during this period, were in fact walking books, walking encyclopedias. The next teacher is Rabbi Joshua ben Hananiah. And it says here, happy the one who gave birth to him. We're told that his mother would bring him as an infant to the synagogue, to the house of study, to attune his ears to Torah. So he did not just learn Torah because he was taught. He learned Torah because it was caught. It was part of his everyday experience. He is known to have been an astronomer and a gifted debater. He was humble and he was pliant. And we are told that he was very unattractive physically. And then we have Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. He is simply described as a saintly sage. Shimon ben Netanel, never mentioned elsewhere in the entire Mishnah. We just know him here as a disciple of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And then we have Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach. And he is mentioned only in this chapter in the Mishnah. He is said to have an ever-flowing fountain, as opposed to Rabbi Eliezer, who was a plastered well that never loses a drop. Rabbi Elazar was an ever-flowing fountain. He had sharp analytical skills and mind, and after the death of his teacher, Rabbi Yochanan, he returns home and abandons discipleship and his colleagues. And the Mishnah continues to tell us about these sages. If you look at Mishnah 13, entry 13, we're looking at page 240 in the Lev Shalem prayer book. Rabbi Yochanan posed a question to his disciples. He said, look around and tell me what is the right path for a person to choose to live a good life. And the disciples offered various answers. Rabbi Eliezer said, a generous eye. Rabbi Joshua said, a person should be a good colleague, a good chaver. Rabbi Yossi said, a person should be a good neighbor. Rabbi Shimon said, a person should have foresight. And Rabbi Elazar said, a person should have a generous heart. To which Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai responded, I like all your answers, but I prefer the answer of Elazar ben Arach. because his view includes all of yours, that a person should have a good heart. So we can analyze these terms. What does it mean to have a generous eye? What does it mean to be a good colleague and to be a good neighbor? One is a more expansive term than the other. Rabbi Shimon has an interesting expression. He says, person should have foresight. Haro'eh et hanolad. You have to see what is about to be born, meaning anticipate the consequences of something or of your own teaching or your own deeds. Don't live just in the moment. Anticipate what the outcomes might be and what your deeds or your teaching may bring about. Rabbi Elazar said, a generous heart, lev tov. One of the things that Sandy and I like to teach our grandchildren is have a good heart. And that's a teaching that we received from our parents. Remember that in the Jewish tradition, the word heart refers both to the mind and to feeling. It is both the seat of cognition and the seat of feeling, appreciation. Have a good heart, live. And Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai's teaching continues. At the bottom of the next page, Mishnah 17, we are introduced to Rabbi Yossi, whom we met earlier. And he has an interesting statement here as a warning to all of us today, Jews and practitioners of our own traditions and of whatever circle of engagement we might be involved in learning and in practice. He says, perfect yourself, make yourself ready for the study of Torah, because it will not come to you by inheritance. We think of Torah, we think of Judaism as a legacy, as something we received. But Rabbi Yossi reminds us that it is not enough to receive. We have to not only accept, but also transmit. The Torah is not received only as an inheritance. Each of us has to appropriate it and make it our own, model it, and transmit it to a next generation. If you turn to page 242, one of the interesting statements of Rabbi Shimon is at the bottom of Mishnah 18. Do not regard yourself as an evil person. Recently, a Christian colleague asked me for some sources from the Jewish tradition that point to a Jewish self-understanding in the light of man's sinful nature. And I responded that in Judaism, we do not believe in original sin. We believe in original virtue. And I quoted this passage from Rabbi Shimon. Do not regard yourself as an evil person. Evil is something that we do, but by nature, we are created in the image of God, our tradition would tell us. And one of the prayers that we say in the morning, as many of you may be familiar with the prayer book, is Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai. Eternal my God, the soul that you have endowed to me, that you have breathed into me, is pure. So we begin with an assumption of the good intentions, the good nature of the human being. And then we guard ourselves and hedge and are aware of the reality and of the constant possibility of straying from that good nature. But we are not by nature evil, and sin is not congenital or transmitted hereditarily. One of the most famous sages of this period is Rabbi Tarfon. Many of you are familiar with his sayings, and the first one will be in Mishnah 20, chapter 2, page 242. Rabbi Tarfon, who was actually well known during the period. He lived between the year 70 and the year 135 of the Common Era, between the two, the destruction of the temple and the squashing of the final revolt against the Romans. He was of priestly ancestry, very wealthy, but at the same time, very modest. And he was one of the earliest defenders of Judaism against the polemics of various new groups, what were called minim, heretical sects that were arising during this very tumultuous period in Judaism. And bear in mind that this is the time when Christianity begins to mark its path and distinguish itself from Judaism. So Rabbi Tarfon taught, the day is short, the work is great, the workers are lazy, the reward is abundant, and the owner is urging us on. So here, using the image of laborers, he reminds us that the day is short. The span of our lives is of limited duration. The task is great. We have to learn and to live and to make the best of our limited years. The laborers are sluggish. We often waste our time in trivialities and procrastination. The wages are high, or the reward is great. What he means here is that the learning of Torah yields wisdom whose reward is intrinsic in this life and sustains us for future generations. And then he says the master of the house is urging us, meaning that now is the time to get going. And he picks up that in the next and final saying of this chapter in Pirkei Avot, Mishnah 21. This was a favorite teaching of Rabbi Tarfon, and you may be also familiar with this. Lo alecha hamelacha ligmor. It is not incumbent upon you to finish the task. Velo ata ben horin lehibatel mimena. But you are not free to desist from it. This is an expression of the importance of doing what we can. I like the way that Arthur Ashe, the contemporary teacher in the field of sports, but he puts it beautifully. He says, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. It is not incumbent upon you to complete the task, but neither are you free to desist from it altogether. These are the teachings of Pirkei Avot, ending in chapter 2. Chapter 3 introduces us to fascinating teachers that we will encounter in the weeks ahead. And I hope that you will take the time to find a text of Avot, of Pirkei Avot. Many prayer books have it as part of the total structure of the prayer book, because as I said, this is a tractate that is studied between Pesach and Shavuot. If not, you can Google it or order it through Amazon. There are many, many wonderful commentaries of Pirkei Avot, and I encourage you to continue studying. In the meantime, here is to all of you. This is an Emory University Dad Cup that Debbie gave me during the time that she was a graduate student there. So Debbie, l'chaim, and to all of you, good morning.